This is Peter Carter here. This is a tough video. I never imagined when I started up the Climate Emergency Institute 10 years ago that the situation would come to this. The theme of the video is the most recent UN climate conference, the COP24. The title for the video I've given is Life Condemned: The Intolerable Evil of Corporate Carbon Corruption. There are many of us in the world who are totally committed to fight this monstrous evil, this crime of all time. In this we have the able assistance of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
Every day I'm faced with the challenges of our troubled and complex world, but none of them looms so large as climate change. If we fail to meet the challenge, all our other challenges will just become greater and threaten to swallow us. Climate change is quite simply an existential threat for most life on the planet, including and especially the life of humankind.
And so I'm making the video with some organizations in mind. Firstly, Our Children's Trust, securing the legal right to a safe climate and a healthy atmosphere for all present and future generations. The climate mobilization started up just a few years ago in the United States, now running a successful city-by-city climate emergency project. And the most recent organization, most appropriately called Extinction Rebellion, started in the UK and is now rapidly spreading with the call to rebel for life. I've turned now to some statements by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently through the latter part of this year 2018. At the COP24 Katowice in Poland on the 12th of December, the Secretary General made this statement that failing to agree on climate action would not only be immoral but suicidal. On the 11th of September this year, 2018, the Secretary General warned, "If we do not change course by 2020, we risk missing the point when we can avoid runaway climate change, with disastrous consequences for people and all the natural systems that sustain us." Prior to this, on the 15th of May, the Secretary General made a statement at the World Summit in Austria that climate change is an existential threat to most life on the planet, including and especially humankind. And he warned that the age of fossil fuels must be ended. The video will explain the accuracy by the science of these statements, these forthright, honest statements by the Secretary General. And I applaud and thank him for the stalwart work that he is doing to push for some integrity and indeed some sanity. The incredible and deplorable feature of COP24 in Poland, as reported by the BBC and the media in general, was that COP24 failed to adopt a key scientific report. The IPCC report on the impacts of a temperature rise of 1.5 degrees C had a significant impact when it was launched last October. It was the 2015 climate conference in Paris that had commissioned the landmark study. But negotiators ran into serious troubles. They were blocked when Saudi Arabia, the United States, Russia, and Kuwait objected to the conference welcoming the document. The BBC notes that Saudi Arabia had fought until the last minute in Korea to limit the conclusions of the document. That would be the final negotiating session of the 1.5 degree C report. They managed to get the vital scientific facts of the 1.5C report out of the negotiations. With no consensus under the UN climate Secretariat rules the passage of the text was dropped. In another report, prominent United States climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann said it right, adding his voice to the general condemnation around the world, describing the alliance of oil states and their action as an axis of evil in a tweet that he put out. It is the fossil fuel triumvirate of Trump, Putin, and Saudi Arabia, Kuwait of course as well, who have colluded to sell out the future of this planet for their short-term financial gain. Of course, they were acting on behalf of the big fossil fuel corporations. And so this is why this is the most evil action and evil result by these governments and the fossil fuel corporations at the 24th UN Climate Change Conference in Poland. So we can sum up our terrible situation with just a couple of sentences, and that is the math of extinction. The fact is that over 2.5 million pounds of carbon are being emitted per second, and that has increased this year, 2018. The figure is from the Global Carbon Project, their authoritative report of 2017, of about 2.57 million pounds of carbon dioxide emitted into the air, that is the lower atmosphere, every second. And the Global Carbon Project report this year, 2018, says that this will increase significantly when all the numbers are in for the year 2018. The other part of this awful equation is that carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for over 100 years after being emitted. So knowing that carbon dioxide emissions is the main cause of global surface warming, climate disruption, it's obvious that we are on the highway to hell. And so you see, and now it is very clear, it's proven that these fossil fuel promoting, oil promoting governments who are acting not for the people but the big fossil fuel oil corporations, they are acting so that the world continues to burn more and more fossil fuels, more and more oil. And that can only lead to our extinction. So we are facing a fossil fuel extinction, and we have to face up to it in order to fight it. The CBC, on reporting this deplorable evil act of the United States, Russia, Kuwait, and the Saudis, when they blocked the 1.5 degrees C IPCC report, the key climate study at the COP24, they reported that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's special report on what would happen if average global temperatures rise by 1.5 degrees C, and to ensure they don't go higher, was widely regarded as a wake-up call for policymakers when it was released in October. So these governments and these fossil fuel corporations, they are fighting us, and we have to fight them, otherwise they will bring about our extinction. This is an illustration that I put together on the current situation because we are now, as the Secretary General of the United Nations pointed out, warned, we are now looking at runaway climate change. This is planetary catastrophe, which I'll explain with the science through the video. So this is global warming up to 2100, which is what the United Nations and the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, reports on. And this is from 1 degree C up to 8 degrees C. So this is where we are at 1 degree C, and we are now well into the danger zone. At 1 degree C, at this time, it may be possible to limit the global warming by 2100 to 1.5 degrees C. If emissions are not immediately reduced on a global basis and rapidly, then humanity will be locked into a 2 degrees C global warming for sure. At 2 degrees C, feedback emissions are operating. By that I mean they're starting to increase the degree of global climate change. So on to the COP24 deadly climate deception. Rather like the Paris Agreement, there was great jubilation at the end of COP24 and a pretense that a great achievement had been achieved just in the nick of time, and that the so-called rulebook, the so-called Katowice rulebook, had been agreed on. But this is a lie. The press release from the UN Climate Secretariat, when I got to read it, was, quote, the agreed Katowice climate package. It's not a rule book. It's a, you can go to the Climate Secretariat website and you'll see all these PDFs, which are reports from the various committees, and the reports are pretty inconsequential. And there was no greater ambition, and there has been no greater ambition since the grossly inadequate national emissions targets going back to 2015. So the Paris Agreement and COP24 just continues the multi-decade pattern of delaying. Now, in the light of today's situations, we have to bear in mind what the main bottom line all-important target is, and that is emissions near zero. Virtual zero emissions. And this was stated very clearly in the fifth assessment of the IPCC. This quote is taken from the synthesis report headline statements for policymakers. And referring to 2 degrees C by 2100 limit pathways, the IPCC said these pathways would require substantial emissions reductions over the next few decades and near zero emissions of carbon dioxide. So back to what will happen if we don't have a global rapid emissions decline by 2020, which is the fact according to present plans or non-plans. And above 1.5 degrees C, there are multiple climate catastrophes, and above 2 degrees C, total planetary catastrophe, as I mentioned. This goes back to, this is a good report, again by Ecofys of 2012, and this shows the impacts here expected for degrees of warming by 2100. So here is 1.5 C, here's 1.5 to 2 degrees C, 2 to 3 degrees C, and above, at and above 1.5 degrees C, there are multiple catastrophic impacts. A little bit of interesting history with this illustration. It shows how long we have been going along with this situation. From the Rio UN Climate Conference, the Earth Summit in 1992, up to Copenhagen 2009, Doha 2012, that this is from 2015, the Paris Agreement, and looking at 2020 now. So this is increasing emissions, of course, on this vertical scale, resulting in these increased degrees of global warming climate change. Runaway. At 1.5 degrees C, Siberian permafrost thaw-down, projected by field research, not global computer model projections. This was a most important research by Anton Vax of 2013. In Siberian permafrost caves, the report was for 500,000 year history of Siberian permafrost, and the paper said The global climates only slightly warmer than today are sufficient to thaw significant regions of permafrost in Siberia. The quote, it goes on, warming of 1.5 degrees C may cause a substantial thaw of continuous permafrost as far north as 60 degrees north, and that can potentially lead to substantial release of carbon trapped in the permafrost into the atmosphere. More scientific evidence of Runaway, which was quite properly given a lot of media attention, was the Hothouse Earth paper published in August of 2018 by Will Steffen and Johan Rockström and others. And this revealed a 2 degrees C risk of tipping cascades, multiple tipping points being exceeded at a threshold of 2 degrees C. They also say a 2 degrees C warming could activate important tipping elements, raising the temperature further to activate other tipping elements in a domino-like cascade that could take the Earth system to even higher temperatures. And that is a scientific definition of climate change runaway, which many of us have been worried about for many decades, because this is quite simply the worst impact of global surface warming. Now, a most important paper published more recently in August of 2018 came from Katie Walter Anthony. And the title was 21st Century Model Permafrost Carbon Emissions Accelerated by Abrupt Thaw Beneath Lakes. Katie Walter Anthony, she's been researching permafrost in the Arctic and thermokarst lakes for many years. And this is a very critical paper. The quote from the paper is, new thermokarst lakes. These are permafrost thaw lakes. They are increasing and spreading with Arctic amplification of global surface warming throughout the Arctic. She and her team determined that accounting for these thermokarst lakes, which emit a lot of carbon, particularly methane, that nearly triples what has until now been accepted as the gradual permafrost thaw alone. And this results in a 2 to 3 times increase in permafrost carbon heating. And this occurs at a global warming of just over 2 degrees C. So we know what to do about it. We've been told from the IPCC for a number of years now what to do about it. And nothing was more definite than the recent IPCC October 2018 1.5 degrees C report, in which they gave us what is the survival global emissions scenario. And there it is. And emissions, global emissions of carbon dioxide have to decline, so-called peak by 2020, and then rapidly decline thereafter. This is readily possible. We have known that for many, many years. As you see, global emissions go into decline from 2020, a rapid decline, and then reach near zero carbon dioxide emissions around 2050. Quite a lot of press has been given to the recommendation that CO2 emissions have to decline at least 45% by 2030. The other important aspect about this is that fossil fuel energy has to be reduced 86% at least by 2050. So in other words, the world must be off fossil fuel energy and on 100% clean, renewable, that is everlasting energy, and we've known for many years that that is possible. The 86% reduction in fossil fuel energy use is from this rapid decarbonization prescription from the IPCC 1.5 degrees C report. The big conclusion from the science is the imperative that to avoid runaway global heating and climate disruption, global emissions of carbon dioxide have to decline from 2020, decline rapidly, and decline to near zero by mid-century. This we can do.